Good morning. Today we are working on PO4. I can estimate and round whole numbers and decimals. We saw this with our power standard, okay, that rounding. We're going to be working more with rounding. So rounding or estimating is approximating a value to a number. I really appreciate those of us who are working silently, writing down our notes. No more whispering. Approximating a value to a number that is oftentimes easier to work with. In order to round effectively, it's important to know your place values. Round 768 to the nearest hundred means what hundred is 768 closest to? Is it closer to 800 or is it closer to 700? So when we're rounding, we're saying which one it's closer to. Your answer will be 700 or 800. So you look at the digit after the place you're rounding to. So if we're rounding to the hundreds, we're going to look at the tens place. Does having 6 tens means the number's closer to 700 or 800? Madeline? 800. Because 60 is closer to the 100 than it is to 0. So 768 is closer to 800 than it is to 700. For each of the following, we're going to write which two numbers could be which two numbers your answer could be. Then we're going to write your answer. So we're not going to do loud yawns. Okay, that's not very respectful, and it doesn't sound good on a video. Okay. Respect is a wonderful thing. I know Mondays are hard. It's hard for me too. But if I'm going to be respectful, you need to be respectful. All right, so we're going to round to whichever place they're telling us to round to. So that means we need to know all of our place values. So we need to know we have thousands. And go ahead and write this on your sheet so you remember your places. Thousands, hundreds, tens, ones. Then we have our decimal. What's our first decimal place? Melanie? Tens. There is no ones. So we need to remember that. First decimal place is the tenths. Then we have hundredths. Remember, if it's a decimal place, it's going to have that TH on it. Then we have thousandths. Does it keep on going? Yes, in both directions, it keeps on going. So our example says we're going to round 56 twelfths to the nearest tenth. So we need to look at that tenth place. So that could be either 56.10 or 56.20. If we look at the number that comes after that 2, it's going to tell us if we're going to round up or if we're going to round down and stay the same. So a 2 is 4 or less, so that means we go down to we keep that number to the same. So we keep that 1. If it's 5 or more, then we round up 1. So round 75,448 to the nearest hundred. So draw a line under your hundredth place. Everything after that's going to be a 0. So we know it could be 7, 5, comma. So 75,000 what? What are our two options that it could be? What's one of them, Madison?
First one could be 400.
75,400. Or what, Melanie? 75,500. So we're either going to go down to the 400 or we're going to go up to 500. So in order to know, remember we have to look at the next number. It's followed by a 4. What does that tell us, Ruby?
Wouldn't it that it's 100 and not 100?
Correct.
So
So that just means we don't have a decimal.
oh,
So would it be 75,400 or 75,500, Lilia?
75,400.
75,400. How did you know that, Lilia? Because that 4 is less than 5. In order to round up, it has to be 5 or more. To stay the same, it's 4 or less. So it was a 4, so it stays the same. Let's do our next one. This one says round to the nearest tenth. What digit is in the 10th place? What should I underline? Madeline?
The 1.
The 1 is in that 10th place. So what are my two numbers that I could round to, Dom?
18.2 and
18.1 or 18.2? Because we have a 1 there, so it's either going to stay the same or we're going to round it up 1. Can I put zeros after it? You can. Technically, I wouldn't, because if I'm rounding to the 10th place, I just want to end at the 10th place, but I'm not going to mark it wrong if you do put zeros in. Typically, when you're working with your decimals and you round to a decimal place, you don't fill in anything more after it. So, if we have a 1 in the 10th place, I need to look at my next number. It is a 5. What does that 5 tell me, Layla? I need to round up to 2. Because it's 5 or more, we go up 1. So you need to round up 1. So you're going to finish this yourself. Okay? We need to scroll down to see what our next section is. When rounding, here's the rule. If the digit after the place you're rounding is 0 to 4, you round, what do? Round down. And the place number stays the same. So when we round down, your place number, the one we underline, stays the same. If the digit after the place you're rounding is 5 to 9, you round up. And that place number that we underlined increases by 1. So if it was a 1, you would put it up to the 2. Then it says round each number below to the given place. So again, same thing that we were just doing. Underline which place it's telling you to round to. So if we have 3,472 to the nearest 10, which digit am I going to underline? Which digit am I rounding to, Claire? Which digit is in my tens place? Of course, right after the comma. So I have 3,472. Which one is the tens place, Sawyer? 3,472. So 3,000, we know that's the thousands place. We want the tens place. Liam?
7.
The 7. That is our tens place, because remember it goes ones, tens, hundreds, And I told you to write this on your paper. So if you were one of my friends who are struggling to think of where it goes, write it on your paper. You should know all the way to the thousands and all the way to the thousandths. So you should have this written on your paper to refer to. When we take the test, it can be on the help sheet to refer to. So if I'm rounding to my tens place, am I gonna round to that 7 up or down? Zelda?
Down because 4 less letters, 4 more ways to school. Well, yeah.
So it was less than 4. You are correct, Zelda. So that 7 stays the same. So 3,470. Our next one says 23.11 to the nearest whole. Anybody know what that means? If we're rounding to the nearest whole. Madeline?
Like the whole number. So like no decimal.
Yeah, we don't want a decimal, we want it to be a whole number. So what's our first place value to make it a whole number? We look up here, what's our place value that's gonna make it a whole number? If we don't have a decimal, we wanna get rid of the decimal, what are we rounding to? The ones place. So the ones is our whole. So whenever it says to round to the whole, that's rounding to the ones place. So it's getting rid of your decimal. So if we look at what number comes after the ones place, it's a 1. So am I going to round up or round down? Madison?
Down.
Down, because 1 is definitely less, 4 or less. So I've got 23.00, or I could just say 23. Just leave it that whole number with no decimal. Why do you think I'm always underlining where I need to round to, Madison?
So then you remember where which one you're rounding.
Yeah, I remember which one I'm rounding. I just draw a quick line under the number I'm rounding to, double check that it matches up here. You should have written out thousands, hundreds, tens, ones, decimal point, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So make sure you're rounding to the correct place value. Any questions on this first page? All right, let's turn our page to look at what we're doing on our second page. Round each number below to the given place. Oh my goodness, we're doing the same thing. Nothing has changed. Same thing. Figure out which digit is in the place value that you're rounding to, underline it, and do your rounding. Liam? Then we've got a word problem. Distance and time are two things that are often rounded. And how precise the rounding is has to do with the value. Typically, the larger a value is, the larger the place value it is rounded to. For example, the world's population might be rounded to the nearest million, while the price of a loaf of bread might be rounded to the nearest $1. Can you think of something that might be rounded to the nearest 100? Or the nearest inch? Or the nearest hundredth of a second? So you're going to come up with an example. What might we be rounding to? If we were rounding to the hundredths place, if we're rounding to the nearest inch, inches are measurements, right? How big something is. Then on the bottom, it says time for a review. We've already done 3 objectives. These are all reviews of those first 3 objectives. So if you don't remember what the absolute value is, what should you do? Madeline?
Look back on the first page.
Look back to the objective that talked about absolute value. It's in your binder. So whenever we do our time for review, it's work that we've just recently done. So this is all work from last week. Why do you think it's important that we review what we've learned? Zelda?
So that way we can remember for any tests or
Yeah.
quizzes that we get.
Helps us remember for the test time. Gregory's right. So it's important that we do our reviews because it helps keep it fresh in our brain for when it comes time for our test. Does anybody have any questions on our rounding? For those of us at home, we hope you are well and we hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day.